Welcome to our Everything is Better with Creators Beyond Disability series. I'm Ashley Rudder, and in this series, we're on a mission to change the way people view and define disability. I will interview top C-Talent creators and global thought leaders from across the disabled community to start difficult conversations, to raise awareness, and acknowledge the lives of disabled people. Now, let's get these conversations started. On this episode, we're speaking with CEO and founder of Diversability, Tiffany Yu. Named by the Wall Street Journal as one of the 100 most influential Asian Americans, Tiffany holds numerous leadership roles in the disabled community, is a 3-time TEDx speaker, content creator of the Anti-Ableism series on TikTok, and today we're going to be talking with Tiffany on disability advocacy, content creation, online communities, and its impact on the disabled community. Another incredible episode is coming your way, listeners. Tiffany Yu is here. How are you, Tiffany?
Doing well. How are you?
I am so good. I'm so good. I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you for blocking out some time in your schedule to speak with us. I would just love to dive in and have you share with our listeners exactly about your background and what was shaping and forming your mind before you became a content creator, and how did you end up being a content creator that you are today?
Sure. So I'll start by saying I feel like I became a content creator accidentally, which maybe is a storyline you've heard a lot. But I would call myself a disability advocate first. And about 25 years ago, I became disabled as a result of a car accident where my dad also ended up passing away. And so with the emergence of different platforms like Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, 10 to 15 years ago, I started just posting a little bit more about that journey of exploring what it meant to be disabled and live well. And then probably circa 2019 or so, I got my first paid brand deal. And over the last couple of years, I've realized that being a creator is actually a viable way that you can create a career for yourself.
Incredible. I mean, I love, again, the democratization of element of social, and that it has given everyone an opportunity to speak on and shed light on topics of interest, and especially around advocacy. I think it's like one of the best places to do so because again, like there's a chance for the shareability to really get out there. So let's talk about, you said, like, I want to dive into what you were just talking about, which is, like you said, being disabled and living well. What does that actually mean to you? Like, how would you define that?
Yeah, so so one of my arms is paralyzed, and I also live with a mental health disability, post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. And I grew up believing, I'm the daughter of Asian immigrants, I grew up believing that I was broken or that I needed to be fixed, and that living well or being well and being disabled were mutually exclusive. And now most of my brand and most of what I'm exploring now on this latest personal journey is we can actually be disabled and be successful, and be disabled and thrive. And can I use my social channels to be able to showcase what little snippets of my own life look like and help model that for other people?
I love it. I think that, again, like I've been, ever since C-Talent, I became aware of C-Talent, I have been learning so much, and it's becoming even more aware to me of, like you were talking about, just like a topic such as, those things of living well and being disabled, being mutually exclusive. And those are important things for us to think about. I would love to know, how has your disability affected your content creation process, and what are things that you wish to see in the future?
So I would say, as someone who has what's known as like an upper extremity disability, meaning that it affects not only my dexterity, but how I use my hands, I think that the assumption with content creating was that, an example could be like when someone's doing an unboxing. And so I have learned, and I talk about this a lot within the disability community, is like we are expert life hackers. And so I have learned to like stabilize the phone in between my knees while I'm doing an unboxing, while most people would hold their phone with one hand and then do the unboxing with their other. And so I think for me, the creator journey is mainly about fun. And so when I look back at the ways I've had to life hack in terms of creating content, sometimes I'm like a little bit impressed with myself, and I'm like patting myself on the back to be like, I can't believe I did that. And so I think I just want to remind people that, like, yes, creating content can create a viable career for you, but I also don't want us to forget that, you know, there is art and there is fun in that creative process of thinking through what's the best way to deliver this message. You know, there are so many different apps available. I feel like I started with Instagram filters back in the day, and then moved over to Visco, and now use Lightroom with editing, and now nice. Short form video is kind of like the thing. Right. And so for me, it's like, okay, let me think about how can I display this visually, or take advantage of like stickers and GIFs to put on the different content. And one other thing I'll share based on the last thing you said is, I think that, you know, when we're recording this during Disability Pride Month in July, is so much of the time, or historically, many of us have understood disability to be a shameful experience. And part of the reason why my content creation journey is around living well, and there's all this talk about, you know, what is disability pride and what does it look like, is to kind of like combat that single narrative that being disabled can only be a shameful experience. And when you say that it's only shameful, it kind of dehumanizes the entire community that we can only fit into a single narrative.
I think that that's an incredibly strong narrative and thing that needs to be discussed, Tiffany. And again, I think that there's just, when you talk about disability and what you were just saying, I think that overall people aren't thinking in that way of like, how are we perceiving? Are we, again, like, are things equally accessible? Are you, again, like these narratives seem like it's just like any other group or marginalized community. It's really just like everyone's living their life. And yes, there are things that are going on there, but everyday life is still a part of a topic of discussion. And there's so much incredible content and storylines that come from the disability community that I just think, again, should be elevated. And now that it's been brought forth to me even more clearly, I've just been discovering so much magic on social and so much important information out there, and so much fun, like you said, fun and entertainment and creativity within the community. It's so good. So I always like to get, if you don't mind, because I know that, again, advocacy is like a big part of what you create content around, but what are questions, or a question that you wish that people would stop asking?
So the thing about advocacy is there are so many different angles at which you can approach advocacy. So I will say that when I showed up on TikTok 2 years ago, because I knew it was a short form video platform, I was like, why don't I create a video series on how I navigate daily life activities with one arm? But if you look on Instagram, I'm not really posting content like that. So probably, you know, the question that I get asked the most is, can it be unparalyzed, or can it be fixed? And that question in itself is curiosity, right? But when I'm asked it, if a video goes viral, you know, if I get asked it 100 times, that ends up becoming a microaggression, which ends up becoming a macroaggression that reinforces to me that, you know, and it's all the variations of this. It's the what's wrong with your hand? Can it be unparalyzed? Can you fix it? You know, I've gotten comments where people are like, you should just cut it off. It's useless. And while that's like, I think to your listeners, that would be like surprising, I'm pretty sure that curiosity is there, right? So it's, how can we also create a level of intimacy and ask questions in a way that don't reinforce harmful narratives, right? Because if we say, can it be fixed? There's an assumption that there is fixing that needs to happen. When we say, what's wrong with it? We're making an assumption that there's something wrong about a person's body. And I will say that part of my own creator journey has been realizing, you know, I've been disabled for 25 years. So I started getting these questions 23 years after I started showing up on video. And even after 2+ decades of living with a paralyzed arm, by getting the waterfall or the deluge of these questions, I started to wonder, like, wait, is something wrong with my body? And I actually came to the conclusion, And I actually came to the conclusion that if my body wasn't supposed to be this way, the universe wouldn't have made it this way, right? And I'm fortunate where I don't have what's called a dynamic disability, where 25 years ago, my arm was paralyzed, and luckily I don't have any lingering pain, which I know a lot of people who have my injury have. But 25 years later, it's still almost in the same condition that it was 25 years ago.
That's so interesting. Again, but I think that just goes into, like you said, everyone has a unique experience, and like what you're just saying is that you cannot, it's not a monolith. No community is a monolith. You need to approach things with kindness and with respect. And I think that's so important. And so, like, with that being said, so let's talk about C Talent and exactly what is it that C Talent, how did that narrative start with you? How did you discover C Talent, and how have they helped bring in different conversations for you to consider in terms of growing your brand?
So one thing I should mention is that I'm what's called like a part-time creator, in that I have other places where I generate income. I also do some public speaking. I also run an advocacy organization called Diversability. And so Keely, who is the founder of C Talent, had kind of been in my circles. I had gotten to know her work because she had, I think, won a grant from ARI or a couple grants as she was getting her business off the ground. I got to know her a little bit more deeply through Clubhouse. Maybe about a year and a half ago, I would hear her in different rooms. And interestingly enough, maybe about a year ago, I reached out to her and I said, hey, Keely, I'm looking for some support with the content creator / influencer side of my business. Right now, I'm just getting a lot of inbounds. Emails are getting lost in the cracks. And it'd be really great if I could have some support as someone to help manage this. And at the time, I had only really understood C Talent to be more in the entertainment space of, actors and actresses and musicians and models, which I'm not in. And then Keely responded. She's like, "This is exactly what we do. Like, let's hop on a call." So we hopped on a call maybe about 9 months ago, or I've been working with C Talent for about nine months now. And it's been really helpful. I mean, I think that I have a couple intersectional identities, right? So I'm a disabled Asian woman. And I have found that knowing how to talk about and pitch disability talent is a really important skill to have, that C Talent knows how to do so intimately and does it so well.
Yes, they are. They're incredible. And when when it was announced that Whalar was bringing C Talent in, I just like, what an incredible acquisition, because of not only the access to this incredible talent pool, also the consulting piece of it is that, we learn so much every day about, like you were saying, just like language, how, understanding all of the many facets of making something accessible, from easy to read versions and visibility pieces to how we just even ask about ability and what we need to be doing for accessibility requirements, for just inviting someone onto the podcast. And so these were such wonderful conversations to be having, just to make sure that everything is level set and everyone's set up for success. So again, I love that C Talent was there for you in that, and that, again, that you also found a place there for your unique situation. Like you said, you weren't necessarily classically entertainment, but yeah, social is in there, and there's so much to be communicated and had in terms of running a business with that. So I'm so glad that you have them as a partner. And what about working with brands? What can you share with me? What has been like some of the joys that you've had? And if you could share anything that surprised you, or that you would like to share, in any anecdotes, let us know.
Yeah. Working with brands. I mean, I think when I didn't start tracking that I was actually a content creator who was like bringing in real dollars until last year. And I think I always felt a little bit embarrassed to tell people that I was a content creator. And then if you look
Mm-hmm.
at, I've been part of TikTok's creator program, one through Twitter and then also one through LinkedIn, is
Awesome.
all of these platforms are heavily investing in creators. And so I wanted to highlight that, yes, brand deals are great, but there are other ways to monetize as well. So you can be part of paid creator programs like the ones I just mentioned. You can also, I think some of the platforms pay by view.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I've learned as what I call like a creative entrepreneur is that it's okay to have multiple streams of income of where you're collecting revenue. So even as a creator, you can get creative about where you're collecting revenue. So maybe you have a merch store, or maybe you offer a course, or you do coaching and other stuff like that. So I don't know if there's anything that's necessarily surprised me, but I think that there could be a little bit more education about terminology and how to review contracts in a way, and that's where Whalar and C Talent end up stepping in and provide a lot of value. Is that, like, again, I came into this space accidentally. I get a contract and I'm not sure what these different words or these different terms end up meaning. And it's been super helpful to have, my talent manager at C Talent to be able to review those and redline them and keep me out of the chain so that I can focus on what I like doing best, which is creating content.
I love it. So I would, because I'm nosy, Tiffany, and I always love pointed feedback because I feel like that's the only way you can really evolve is if you have really pointed and distinct feedback. And so what is some, like, where does this play a place specifically where you would love to see evolve in terms of working with a platform, working with a brand that you would love to see enhanced or do better? Or and then I would also love to know if someone ever has knocked your socks off in terms of accessibility and you were just like, whoa, that's a game changer. If everyone, if this is my banner moment, my North Star on like, this is exactly how you should be doing it. I would love to know that too.
Let's think. I would say access is a very personal thing, right? So access for me looks very different. Like if someone is asking me to add captions to a piece of content that's like 5 or 10 minutes long, that's going to take me a little bit more time, right? Because I navigate using a computer with only one hand.
Mm-hmm.
So for my specific disabilities, I think I have felt very comfortable vocalizing like what my needs are and what the timeline needs to look like in order for me to get content produced. I don't want to, I think that oftentimes we're asked like what brands are doing it right or who's doing it right. But the reality is that the unemployment rate for disabled people has remained relatively unchanged since 1991, which is over 30 years ago. So
Interesting.
I don't want to say that any of us are really winning right now, but the fact that the creator economy is helping to democratize access to paid deals, and this is specifically what C Talent focuses on, is huge. So as I look to what the next phase of my advocacy looks like, I often talk about what does disability centered economic justice really look like, right? Can we get disabled creators making enough through brand deals or through all of their different avenues as a creator that they can create they can do this full time if they want to. So I know that didn't really answer your question.
No,
that was like a little
it
bit
does.
of a cop out.
No, it's not though, Tiffany, because I'm definitely not here to, like I wanted this always to be based in reality. And like you were saying, like it may not like just, even though something could be done better, that's great. But obviously we're still getting there. We're still, in the process of creating, like you said, these the awareness, the vernacular, the understanding, the approach. And just like how, again, in so many marginalized communities, it's like, we're starting with awareness of the issue, and then we can start getting into the diversity, and then the equity, and then the inclusivity of it all, and like see it as a funnel of process and change as we get there. And so I'm happy to have you say like, this is Ashley, this is where it is.
And I'll also share, I have shared this publicly, but my first brand deal in 2019 was like a combo of Instagram and Twitter. And I think I got paid $5,000 total for, a couple of tweets and, an in-feed Instagram post and a couple of stories. And at the time I only had 5,000 Instagram followers. But the client that I was working with understood that my audience is super niche. And so I think that there's always a big question around like, how much should I charge? What should I charge? And I literally have people sliding in my DMs asking like, how much should I charge? And it's hard to go back to them with a number, right? And so for me in 2019, I just threw a number out. I had a small following, but it was very active. It was very engaged. And even, I don't know, 3 years later, I would still consider probably to some of the other talent on C Talent's roster, even Whalar's roster, I'm probably still pretty small, but it still is very niche and it's still very active, right? And so as you think for other creators who are listening, as you're thinking through your own pricing, it's not necessarily like benchmarking yourself around with someone else who has a similar following, but looking at like, what's the type of content you're posting, who is your audience, and what do they look like? And even using platforms like Clara is one that I use, which they call themselves like the glass door for creators, where sometimes if I have a brand reaching out and it's below what I would usually charge, I'll look on Clara to see, oh, this is in line with what they've usually paid creators in the past. But for me, last thing I'll say is that as a part-time creator, I do feel like I have a little bit more privilege to be able to say no to a deal if it isn't in line with, the pricing that I'm looking for or the type of content that I have the capacity to create. So I just wanted to name that as well.
It's so, so good because I completely agree. And I see it across the board, with the work that I do at Whalar as the head of creators. Equity is the biggest piece. And like you're saying, an active community, a niche community has so much value because the passion runs really, really high and the loyalty runs really, really high. And so I think that, if you are bringing that, if you're bringing the engagement, you're bringing niche, or you're bringing a true community onto a campaign, like there's so much value that you're bringing. And so never, ever, ever underestimate that piece of it. And so I think that, wow, you learned that right out of the gate, which is so, so good. And I'm glad to hear that you're seeing the pay equity that needs to be there, and that, things like, like the glass door of social and influencer is there because it is needed because, again, it has been so mystical, the benchmarks for pay. So I'm so glad that you decided to like make that a touch point to speak on because it's huge and brands need to know that. They really, really need to know that. Like, what advice would you give any new disabled content creators out there in terms of, like I said, from topics to getting started to going about your business? I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would say back in the Clubhouse days a year and a half ago, I remember I used to be part of like a branding office hours that would happen every Sunday with someone named Rachel B. Lee. She calls herself the branding lady boss. And the number of questions that we would get from people who would say, I just launched my account, how do I get paid? And one of the things I want people to remember is that none of this is happening overnight. Like, I've had my Instagram channel for maybe, actually this year, I think marks 10 years. And I didn't get my first paid brand deal until 2019, right? So it took 7 years of me building my audience, posting consistently. And so I would say, and it's hard because I have a lot of people reaching out being like, I really want to get into social media advocacy. How do I get started? And my response for them is like, just start. And that's actually why I like TikTok as a platform, because TikTok to me, at least my content there is like a variety show of Tiffany's life. Like yesterday, I was reflecting on a conversation that I had with another disabled content creator named Paula Carozzo. And she was talking about how the PR space has become really democratized by social media. So in a way, like our social media channels become our press. Like we're creating our own press if no one's paying attention, right? And I think as a disability community, we have spent a long time not being paid attention to by some of these mainstream outlets, but now we have power, or we're starting to realize that we have power and influence as our social media channels become bigger and continue to grow. So all of that to say is that authenticity is the name of the game. So I understand that I am a little bit awkward, and I lean into that because that's like who I am, and I'm introverted. So if you invite me to like your housewarming, I might not show up, and that's okay, right? And so like, how can we show the fullest embodiment of who we are on social media? And I also try not to like sugarcoat things. So I really sometimes I want to like show people the behind the scenes. So just start. Authenticity is the name of the game. And number 3, I will also say, like, make sure you have a support system in place away from social media, because it can impact your health. You know, I remember there was a period of time where I was checking those analytics way too much. I was posting something and seeing how many people were watching it. And now I'm just like, I'm posting this because I'm posting this for me. And again, I want to put an asterisk in that, you know, I have built my following. I think it's around 170,000 now across all the different platforms. So because people know who I am, I'm just like posting all the stuff. So yeah, I think those are my 3, because one of that last one on the mental health side is I get asked a lot how we can help preserve our mental health with this, you know, this hustle culture that we're in to just continue to post. And I think for me, making sure that I feel like I have a colorful life outside of a screen is how I'm able to maintain that balance.
That's so perfectly stated. I couldn't agree anymore. I think that's fantastic advice because, and I mean, come on, what would we do without TikTok? It lowered the barrier of entry so much for us and let us know that we could, like you said, we could show up with every facet of our true self and let it all hang out and not be worried about the editing. Because when I tell you that is so stressful.
It is. No, and the fascinating thing is just brands are paying attention. You know, there was like a viral trend of an account of a woman who was making like 1999 versions of companies' logos. And she made one of TikTok, and TikTok updated theirs. And then all these companies, you know, verified company accounts were like commenting, being like, us next. So brands are paying attention. And I think also trying to figure out, how do we get onto TikTok? So if you've built your following there, you know, you can be a helpful bridge for them onto there as well. But I know video is scary for a lot of people. And believe it or not, I'm not the biggest fan of the sound of my voice, but I remind myself that the message is more important than how, you know, me being self-conscious of the way I look or the way I sound.
Totally. And boy, have you leaned into your purpose, Tiffany. And I love that is, you know, something that you stated earlier, is that you know that this is a part of your journey and a part of your purpose. And I like, we really see you shining out there, and everything that you have to say is just so incredible. Like, don't stop, Tiffany, don't stop. It's so good. And I'm loving your cross-functional division of like who you are on each platform. I think, again, like, you've just dropped a lot of gems here that I think that people can really learn from, in terms from a brand perspective and from a creator perspective, on how you view creators, and of course creators with disability. And I'm just pumped. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insight.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Everything is Better with Creators Beyond Disability series. To listen to more episodes, check out Everything is Better with Creators on all podcast channels.